Without further ado, I want to introduce our guest today from Spark Systems. And you might ask yourself, what does it take to compete in long distance events without hitting the proverbial wall? Anna Sparks of Spark Systems and endurance race veteran and pivot pro cyclist Taylor Lideen are going to share with us their nutritional strategy and also their mindset strategies to help bring out that peak performance over the long haul. So Anna Sparks is the founder and owner of Spark Systems, and she's had an undeniable passion to help people reach their full potential. Anna has more than 16 years of experience helping other collegiate teams, professional athletes, and amateurs achieve their personal health goals. Includes wellness, fitness, all that. Everything that comes to being a success on the bike and in life a little bit. She's a certified MET Level 1 metabolic efficiency training specialist with a bachelor's degree in exercise science and a master's in exercise physiology. Taylor Lideen, pro endurance athlete, and in 2018, he earned first place solo geared rider and set the course record for the number of laps at the 24 hours of the Old Pueblo. He also placed first in the True Grip Epic 100 and came in second at the 24-hour World Championships in Scotland. So Taylor and Anna, why don't you guys share with us a little bit more about your origin stories? How did you go from, I want to ride my bike more than just what I do on a Sunday afternoon to where you guys are now? Give us some insight here. We want to know how you got here to where you are today.
Oh, fantastic. Well, first of all, thanks so much for having us today. We really appreciate the opportunity to chat with everybody and share our stories. So I would start with, I was raised in competitive athletics, mainly soccer, and just decided after I finished my master's degree, I started coaching soccer collegiately, and just decided that I still wanted to be competitive myself. And so I actually, one of my advisors in college was an endurance athlete and had swam the English Channel. He had done a lot of 200-mile runs and all of these biking events. And he was like, hey, Anna, you got these huge legs and huge ass. You should get on a bike and you should start riding. I was like, yeah, okay, cool, let's do it. And so that took me to getting interested in bicycles. And then after I was coaching and trying to compete in triathlons, the bike I just fell in love with. And so I just decided that I still wanted to be competitive myself. I ended up getting called into the Olympic Training Center and got picked up by a women's professional team. And I'm talking on the road. And I thought to myself, you know what, I've got enough money saved that if I raced 1 year professionally, I could still pay my mortgage, I'll be okay. And so I decided to take that leap and try to go pro on the road. And 1 year turned into 6. And within that time, I started my own company, Spark Systems, because everything that I was doing for myself and for my teammates, I decided that I needed to share that with everyone. And understanding that everything that I did started with measuring, with doing metabolic testing, which we'll get into soon, and then being able to put together personalized nutrition and exercise plans for people that were interested in trying to ride long distances or short distances, or they just were thinking about overall health. And so, yeah, that's where I am today.
Wow. How about you, Taylor? What's your story?
Hey guys, first of all, thanks for having me on. Performance coach for Spark Systems. It's a pleasure to work with Anna. She's taught me so much from the metabolic side of things, also some mindset. Just her experience on the bike has really, I've gained a lot of knowledge from that. But yeah, I started riding mountain bikes. My dad had always raced mountain bikes, specifically 24-hour races. So I'd always kind of been around it when I was younger, and he'd always done it on a team, and he tried to talk me into getting a team together when I was in high school. And I said, I think I was afraid that I was going to be the anchor on the team. So I was like, I'll try it solo. And I knew instantly, like, this was something that I truly enjoyed, because there were so many ups and downs, and I kind of had to navigate my own way through it. And I've I've had my fair share of struggles, both physically and mentally in the sport. So navigating through those has been a big journey, something that I'm really grateful that I've been able to learn from. And then within the past couple of years, I've really been able to figure out my diet with the help from Anna, and then pass it along to clients that I'm working with. So that journey on the bike is something that I really cherish, but also being able to pass that knowledge along to others, specifically the youth, and doing youth clinics, skills clinics, and then racing my bike as much as I can throughout the year.
Josh, you're on mute.
You're right. I am. So as I was saying, it's us that should be thanking you guys for taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us for this. Thank you guys for this. This is really cool.
We appreciate it.
Now,
Yeah.
we're going to get into some nutrition stuff, but you guys touched on something, passing the things that you've learned to others. Because I've known lots of fairly successful cyclists. We talked with 1990 world champion Ned Oren last week. I've known a lot of other fast riders that are just really good. But having that skill set to pass that knowledge on to others, that's not in every fast rider, is it? And maybe you can give us some tips on give us an idea of what it takes to really carry somebody through this journey, because every journey is individualized, right? No two people are on the same journey. What are some of the things that you guys do to help convey that important knowledge and make your athletes a success?
Anna, do you want to go?
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, first of all, when people come to us, in the beginning, we were very athlete focused, and it was mainly, endurance type athletes that were coming to us for help. And then it actually kind of morphed into, hey, we actually work with people for overall health and longevity, as opposed to just helping people try to reach their performance goals. Typically, if a client comes to us, they have maybe an event in mind that they want to do. And we know that we're going to prepare them for that event so they will be successful and reach their goals. But ultimately, we know that we are going to better their health, and we're going to empower them with the tools to take control of their health for the rest of their lives. So maybe they will be, are just going, hey, I just need help achieving this, again, this particular event, reaching this goal. But we know ultimately that they're going to come out of this relationship as a much healthier and more thriving individual.
Makes go ahead, Taylor.
I like what you said, Josh, about how everybody's journey is not the same. And that is 100% the truth. Everybody starts somewhere. And some people may have more hours to quote unquote train, ride, look after their nutrition. But with the help from someone like Anna at Sparks, who's really knowledgeable in the nutrition side of things, the one cool thing that I learned was I was so focused on training so many hours during the week. I just thought I had to ramp up the hours. I had to consistently ramp up the hours. And I'd always looked after my diet, but not in the way that I could have. So once I learned that, I can dial the hours back, look after my nutrition, and then really make improvements on the bike, but more importantly, off the bike in daily life, that was something I was like, this is a game changer. The light bulb just went off. And if it hadn't been for Anna, I wouldn't have known that. So being able to pass that knowledge along, and my firsthand experience with racing 24-hour events where fueling is such an important thing, not just during the 24 hours or just the 2 days before the race, it's the weeks and months leading up to, that can not only take away stress mentally going into the event, but you can go into it with more confidence knowing that your ducks are in a row.
Sure. Mm-hmm. Great insight, guys. All right.
Yeah, I love hearing that, Taylor. And you are spot on. A lot of these, probably a lot of people that are on this Zoom call today are going, hey, I really would like to train for an endurance event, but I only have maybe 8 hours a week to dedicate to training, or maybe even less than that. And I'll tell you, that is okay. That is plenty of time to still be able to reach your goals if you're doing the things off the bike that you need to be doing. And that is paying attention to your daily nutrition, working on, stretching, flexibility, strength and mobility work, and then also getting sleep, making sure that we are super focused on recovery. And another thing that I know that Taylor will speak to a little bit more soon is just that mindset, that mindfulness, really understanding that you are confident in that preparation. But everything that you're doing off the bike, and Taylor can attest to this, that is the differentiator. That's what's going to set you apart. And so it's a really small amount. I mean, don't get me wrong. Yes, you need to train for sure. You need to spend time in the saddle, on the bike, working on a lot of different things. But what you do off the bike is probably way more important than what you do on the bike.
For sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I have a swimming pool service and repair business, and in that, when I'm talking to customers, I explain it to them. It's like a stool with 3 legs. You've got circulation, filtration, and water chemistry. And if any of those fall short, the other 2 have to make up for it. But at some point, the stool will tip over and it'll be out of balance. It's the same with your performance on the bike or at the run, where you've got like a table with legs, and they each represent a different part. And the more balanced you can get those legs, the better your performance is going to be. And it comes from that work. And that was always something that kind of hit me years ago, was don't be so nervous at the start line on race day, because whatever you did or didn't do in the weeks and months prior to that, it doesn't matter, because it's race day now. Clear your mind, get in that good mindset, and just do your best, because you can't change what you did or didn't do in the past. And so just relax, get in the zone, get in the zen, and race hard. So let's get into the nutrition side of things. Of course, everybody is different. People are like snowflakes. So one system might work great for somebody. Somebody else might try that identical system of nutrition, and they might fail miserably. So let's get into it. Let's talk about metabolic efficiency and how we achieve that and how we find that in each individual person.
Great. Okay, Taylor, I'm going to take this.
Okay.
So metabolic efficiency is essentially blood sugar optimization. And in Spark Systems, we believe that if you can measure it, you can make it better. And so anyone that we work with, whether it be a CEO of a company, a elite athlete, just somebody that is struggling with weight management, we always start with a metabolic efficiency test. And that test is going to tell us where their inefficiencies lie in their metabolism, in the way they are utilizing their food for fuel, and what are they utilizing most, right? So by doing this test, and actually it's 2 tests. So the first one is going to be a resting metabolic test. And that resting metabolic test is going to tell us exactly how many calories someone would need just for brain function, just for survival. And the real power, though, is of those calories, what percentage is coming from fat and what is coming from carbohydrate. And so once we know that, we actually know on a daily basis what's actually going on under the hood. And that way, if we can measure it, again, we can change it. We can make those modifications to their daily nutrition to make their bodies actually prefer the utilization of their internal fat stores for fuel. Now, the second test that we do is going to be an active metabolic test. That's where they're actually going to get on the bike, and we're going to now see what their metabolism is doing while they are active. And from this test, that's going to tell us exactly the exact point in which this individual changes over from utilizing primarily fat for fuel to utilizing carbohydrate or glycogen. And so again, once we have the data from these 2 tests, and again, it's very individualized. We are taking a breath by breath gas exchange is what we're measuring of each individual. And so my metabolism looks completely different than Taylor's, than yours, Josh. And so instead of guessing at what we need, why not measure it And once we measure it, now we can make sure that their daily nutrition is dialed, that their exercise intensities are dialed in order to create what we call metabolic efficiency, which again is just optimizing someone's blood sugar.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you know, I was just thinking about this. One of my favorite activities at our Flag to Grand Canyon Finish Festival up near the rim of the Grand Canyon by the Grandview Overlook is the piñata. And you know, with a piñata, and this is what we do with the adults, we get them drunk, we put a blindfold on them, we spin them around, and we give them the stick and we tell them to start swinging. And they're swinging for that piñata and looking for it. And that's kind of a metaphor for what a lot of people at the beginning are doing with their nutrition. They have no reference point. They know what the goal is, but they have no reference point. The target's moving, they can't see. And what you're doing is you're removing the proverbial blindfold off of the piñata swinger so they can hit their goal much more accurately. And you know, your services come with a fee. This is how you feed your family and you eat. But by someone hiring you, they're going to save themselves a ton of time and money to where it's going to be maybe more time and money back to them than if they're just flying blind.
Absolutely. Again, back to that client that comes and says, I really want to do these events, but I only have maybe 8 hours a week to dedicate to being on the bike. And we're like, well, hey, we can even reduce that. We know everybody's got stuff going on in their lives, and we want to make it's all about quality over quantity. And if we have a great starting point by starting with using a metabolic efficiency test, then we've got great data. And now we can actually remeasure to make sure that what we are doing is working. We can make any modifications that we need and continue progressing that client, that athlete along.
And to further expand on the not everybody's the same, that will reflect from the metabolic test itself. But what's really cool about the metabolic test is it's so individualized to that person. It doesn't matter if you're an elite athlete or someone who's just getting into the sport for their first time, who's taken on the ride, like the Flag to Grand Canyon, or their first 24-hour race. We can nail down the nutrition and the training specifically to that individual based on the test results. And you don't get more individualized than that, pretty much.
Sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so important. And you know, Andy, you touched on that testing throughout. You need to hit those waypoints to find out where you're at, if you're heading towards that target or that goal, or you're moving away from it. And those intermediate tests are extremely critical to that. So, you know, that's important. And not to go down back to my swimming pool analogy, is that repeated testing is so important. When a customer has a green pool, we've got to repeatedly test to make sure we're going in the right direction, to make sure we're adding things and doing things right to get to that goal. And it's no different than achieving your performance goals, especially with that nutrition aspect. Why don't we let's discuss? I want to know, you know, some of the common mistakes that people make with respect to nutrition when it comes to riding or racing. You know, it's more, we have to do some different things than if we're just living our average daily lives and having our bowl of cereal before we go to work in the morning, versus we're going to go out and do a 3, 4, 5 hour ride. Correct?
Yes, that is the case. And I would say that the majority of people that come to see us, they just start with, tell me what to eat when I'm on the bike. Tell me what I need to do when I am out on a 4-hour ride, a 5-hour ride. And my first response is always, if you've waited that long and we are now having to address what you're doing in the ride, we've missed the boat. And so what were you doing the other 20 hours of the day? What did you do last week with your nutrition? What did you do last month? Because if you have now, we're putting all our eggs in this basket saying, oh my gosh, what I'm going to do on this ride, you know, like it's way too late. And so we try to, that's why we do the testing up front, so that we can begin to address their daily nutrition, what they are doing, what they are eating. And when I think about nutrition framework, I think about 3 levers that need to be pulled. And if we can pull one of those levers on a daily basis, awesome. You know, 2, even better. 3, lights out, right? And those levers would be what are the composition and the quality of your macronutrients? What's the timing of your macronutrients? And then also the quantity of your macronutrients. And so again, if you're just guessing at that kind of stuff, then you're not going to be able to hit that mark. So what happens? You're now going to need to train a lot more. You are going to have to do a lot of other things in order to make up for you not putting the proper fuels in the tank. Because at the end of the day, it's going to be 75% of the game is going to be what you're consuming off the bike. And yes, can we help you with what you need to consume on a 4 or 5 hour ride? Absolutely. But that's easy once we've taken care of what you're doing off the bike.
Sure. So let me ask you this. In this day and age, you've got vegans, you've got folks that are gluten-free, you've got people that are just good old-fashioned vegetarians, and then you've got people like me where you eat everything except for the things that you don't like to eat. So how do you work with people that have these different diet requirements?
So it's still, it's very easy, right? We're not going to force anybody to do anything that they are not going to want to do. But once we have those numbers in place, it's really easy to go through and be able to help them select the foods that they need that will still fall within those requirements. Now, obviously, when you are trying to optimize blood sugar, you want to make sure that you're paying attention to having a bit of higher fat, moderate protein, lower carbohydrate. And I know that people, have been taught that whenever they are exercising so much that they need that carbohydrate. Well, that's where it comes in that we're going to actually teach the body to begin to utilize all of that stored energy that they always have on board. When you think we work off of 2 fuel tanks, one tank is going to be our glycogen or our carbohydrate tank is what you can think of it. It's a really small tank. We can store about 1,200 to 1,500 calories of glycogen, and we store that in our liver and our muscle. It's a really quick burning fuel. The second tank that we have is our fat tank. And I'm not talking about the fat that's on your belly or on your booty. I'm talking about the fat within your cells. We can store 50,000 to 80,000 calories of fat within our cells. And that is a super slow burning fuel. But if you think that you are just reliant on what you keep putting in, all you're doing is pulling from that small tank all the time. So you're constantly hungry and you're constantly wanting to replenish with more carbohydrate. And you're never actually able to tap in to that massive fat tank that you have that's always there, all of that stored energy. You could go forever on those fat stores. But if you're constantly, sticking to the standard American diet, where there's a plethora of food around us all the time and access to processed foods, a lot of sugar, refined grains, and a lot of carbohydrate and processed oils, then all your body is going to do is just utilize that small tank. And you're never going to access all of that stored energy that's always there.
Wow. And that's crazy to think about because we just think about, I think about you can't see me jiggling my belly right now, but I'm thinking about that fat that's there and like, oh, okay, if I ride in this zone, then my belly will get smaller, but it's a little more complex than that. And we've got to be able to unlock that door. Now, I want to circle back to our metabolic testing, and maybe you can kind of describe to us what that process is. Is that putting someone on an exercise bike and then hooking tubes up to their orifices and measuring what comes out while they exercise? And then the other part of the question is how often are we performing this metabolic test?
So tons of poking and prodding during this. No, not at all. All you do, it's super simple. You're going to come in, and for that resting test, you're just going to sit comfortably in a chair, and we're going to put a mask on your face. And that mask is hooked up to our metabolic cart. I'm sorry?
I said it's a very fashionable thing these days.
Exactly. Everyone now wears a mask, right? No big deal. So we put that mask on their face, and all we're doing, again, is just collecting their expired gases, right? So how much oxygen are they breathing in? How much carbon dioxide are they breathing out? And after that test, you're going to sit comfortably in that chair for 10 to 15 minutes. We ask that you come in somewhat of a fasted state. So maybe no food or drink within 3 hours before the test. You can have pure water, no big deal. And then we're going to move you from that chair onto a stationary bike that has power, has watts on it. And we're going to take you through a graded exercise test. And so the main part of this test that we're looking at is we're looking at all of this metabolism data. And if a client wants to go all the way to their VO2 max, then again, we'll take them all the way to their max, but we're really looking at what is their metabolism doing as we get closer to that max? So what is their bodies preferring for fuel? Now, again, on this exercise bike, you're going to have that same mask still on your face, again, collecting those expired gases. The test typically, would be 15, 20 minutes. Sometimes it goes maybe 25. If someone is really, super fit and going, for a long time. And then we'll do some recovery data. We'll take some recovery data, get the mask off and get them off the bike and go over the results. We typically would say come in quarterly for testing, but it all depends on what your goals are. Some people really want to see the data after, if they're super committed and they are ready to go and they're ready to make some changes, then they want to see that data. They want to see the numbers changing. And so we may recommend that they come in even sooner than that 3-month timeline. And that way we can adjust their numbers, make those modifications. And then now when we send them back out, into the world, now they've got accurate data to continue to utilize.
Okay. Now I've got a question. It's kind of spurred, somebody who wants to know. Jamie was wondering, I'll make this a 2-part question. What about a beer at the end of your ride or your race? Is that okay? And then the other part of that question is, I've always gone off of that, after a hard ride or a race, you've got like this 90-minute window where you can eat whatever you want and your body will just burn it. The oven will be hot enough to just incinerate whatever. And so after a race, I'd be like, all right, cool. I'm going to eat I'm going to get my Costco cookies and put Nutella on one, peanut butter on the other, slap them together, just wash that down with a glass of cold milk, and that's okay. I can do that. So tell us, let's talk about a little bit of like post-race / hard effort metabolism, and what that kind of looks like.
So yes, the mindset of most people, they always have heard that they have this 30-minute window right when they finish a race, to replenish. Well, and I will say that is still the case. You actually have about a 2-hour window, but only if you are going to race again the next day, or you're going to put in another hard effort the next day. That's when that 2-hour window becomes pretty critical. But otherwise, if you're not, like if you finish with flag to GC and that's all you're doing, and the next day is going to be a rest day, or you're just going to maybe pedal along or maybe go on a hike or something like that, then just have a complete meal after you get off the bike. Nothing needs to change. We don't need to be pounding a bunch of recovery shakes and, a bunch of this sports nutrition stuff. Really just eat real whole foods and eat a complete meal right after you get off the bike. And that if you want to, go take a shower first, get clean, get some water in you. As long as you're staying hydrated, you're gonna be fine. And then eat that complete meal. And then that's gonna help with that recovery. Now, if you are going to do another race or a really hard effort the next day, then you do want to think about that 30-minute window, making sure that we're getting in some carbohydrate. We're topping off those liver and muscle glycogen stores. You want to get in some protein because you probably had some muscle breaking down during that race. We want to make sure that our food is replenished. So in that 30-minute window, you could have maybe a recovery shake or something like that, but then know that you've got, after that's done, try to get a complete meal in within that 2-hour window.
And that's what's so cool about the testing results is based on the training for that specific day, whether it's heart rate and power based, we know exactly what fuel you're pulling from what stores. So are you turning on that turbo, which is the carbohydrate, or are you just that diesel the whole day, which is those fat stores? So based on that training ride or race, from that data, we know what you burned. So is that recovery shake 100% needed, or is a full meal needed? So it's really individualized based on what zones you hit, and you can go really deep on that, but it's really interesting to see how individualized it is based on those specific efforts.
Yeah, so it's funny because one of our viewers who's watching DG had a question where he's asking that exact thing: is does our heart rate influence which tank we're drawing from, and is that the same for everybody, or is that dependent on, for example, their resting heart rate versus their max heart rate, and is there a certain percentage in there where that tells us whether we're pulling glycogen versus fat?
It's all dependent on their level of metabolic efficiency. So say that we have an athlete that comes in and when they test, and I wish that I had a picture of the graph that actually shows what we call their metabolic efficiency point, and that's going to be their crossover point. And when I talk about their crossover point, it's going to be the intensity or the heart rate in which they change over from utilizing primarily fat for fuel, utilizing the big tank, to utilizing the glycogen, utilizing that small tank. And it's different for every single person. And once we measure it the first time and we have that baseline data, we're going to put together what is the proper nutrition, what's the proper exercise intensities in order to move that metabolic efficiency point to the right, where now they're going to achieve it at higher intensities or higher heart rates, okay? So say that Taylor came in and when he started out, his metabolic efficiency point was at 130 beats per minute. So what that means is that every time Taylor gets on his bike, and if he's at or below 130 beats per minute, he's primarily utilizing the big tank, that fat tank for fuel. And when he goes over that 130, he now starts to dip more into those glycogen stores. He's still utilizing some fat, but fat begins to drop off substantially. So our goal with Taylor would be to move that metabolic efficiency point again to the right, to where now next time when he comes in, maybe it's at 140 beats per minute or 150 beats per minute. And so now that means that that's giving him almost 20 extra beats that he's using the fat tank. And so he's not reliant on cramming all of these gels and goos in his mouth. And don't get me wrong, sports nutrition, great, whatever. But if you don't need it, right, because you've already got all of this stored energy there, then even better. You don't have to even think about it. I mean, it's so liberating to be on the bike and know that intensity in which you really don't need to be cramming all this food down your throat while you're trying to train.
And what's really cool about that is then you know what foods to bring with you on either a training ride or a race. So you can bring foods that have carbohydrate in them, like mix in a bottle. So when there's a steep hill and there's no way of getting up it other than really turning on the gas and tapping into those glycogen stores. But then you can also have foods that have higher fat content with you, and you're not going to have to constantly be piling it in. So having an emergency source of carbohydrate on you, so when you do turn that gas, it's there, but you have all your bases covered.
For sure. So Taylor, I got Rachel W has a question, and she wants to know, what was your biggest change, your biggest nutrition change once you started to understand metabolic efficiency? Was there a big jump? Were there some things you're doing where you look back now and you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I was eating that during or after or before a race, to versus now you have a broader picture, sharper glasses on, so to speak, when it comes to nutrition that you're doing now?
I'll give you an example. I used to, when I was working in bike shops, that's how I met Clint, Anna's husband. Clint would come in all the time, and I would, as a snack during the day, I would have an entire baguette. I would eat an entire loaf of bread for a snack, right? So to me, I always thought more carbohydrates, the better. I just cram in the carbohydrate. And I noticed I was never getting faster on the bike. In fact, I had a plethora of health issues going on at the time, but that was not helping at all. It came to the point of I basically had to stop racing. I had to stop racing 24-hour races altogether.
Wow.
And I just had no idea. I thought that was the norm. That's what I had read in magazines. That's what I had read on the internet. And after talking with Anna, just this light went off of like, I've been doing it wrong the whole time. I've been on the total end of the wrong end of the spectrum. And the health, not only on the bike improved, but more importantly, just in my daily life. My energy seems to be more even across the board versus these spikes and dips. So that really has changed, like I said, not just time on the bike, but my life in general, which it's awesome if we can go faster on the bike, but if our life is miserable off the bike, what's the point?
Yeah.
Right. And it's funny. So, one of our viewers took a little bit of offense, and I don't blame her. She is from a country where the baguette is a staple, and they love cycling. Anya Strogi is she's a little hurt. They dog in the baguette. And, she's a fellow pivot rider up from Flagstaff, her and her whole family. Great racer, great woman. But she was also wondering, and I think we touched on this already a little bit, maybe we can clarify, can you make some changes to your metabolism? Or is it just, your DNA is set in stone and that's where your metabolism is, and then we just work around that by making you more fit or efficient? Can you change your metabolism? Or are you just stuck with it with your DNA?
100% you can change it, and you can change it actually quite quickly. We can make changes to metabolism in 7 to 14 days. Does that mean that you are metabolically efficient in that time? No. But we can make major changes where your body will become more apt to utilizing those internal fat stores for fuel, for sure. And then if we continue to, metabolic efficiency is not a diet, by the way. It is a lifestyle. And it is something that is sustainable for the rest of your life. And it's not drastic. It's not keto. It's not paleo. It is basically just, we figure out how to optimize your blood sugar. And when your blood sugar is optimized, just like Taylor just said too, you have sustained energy all throughout the day. You sleep. Your mental acuity is higher. When you're pulling from those internal fat stores and you're in a race, your mental acuity is spot on. Your decision making, your pedal efficiency is on. Everything is on. When you start going into glycogen and you're talking about that wall that you hit, well, that's what happens, is that you blast through that small tank. So if we can delay the time in which we go into that small tank, awesome. That's what we want. That's going to not only increase performance, but it's also going to increase health and longevity.
And I think the biggest misconception is it's quote unquote ketogenic, and that's not the truth at all. We're fueling the work that you're doing and fueling for your demands of your current lifestyle. So I think people just automatically assume that carbohydrates are cut off, and that's not the case at all. If intensities go up, we introduce carbohydrate. If intensity stays low, we introduce more fats. So there's this balance, and like Anna said, it's not a diet. It is a lifestyle, and it's fueling the work that you're doing.
Sure. Now, Taylor, you touched on a current buzzword in the diet / nutrition industry. Preceded by legendary things like the Zone, the Atkins diet, my favorite, the Hostess diet, ketosis. What is this keto diet? What is this all about? Is this snake oil? Is this only a very niche thing for people with very specific issues or problems or things they're going to work on? Or is this just some kind of just marketing ploy to sell products?
Well, like a ketogenic diet for some people, like especially, epilepsy, they have found it to be extremely beneficial. in regards to using it for athletic performance, to increase athletic performance, I will say that there is potentially a time and place, but it's so drastic. It's hard to imagine people staying in a ketogenic state all year round. Now, doing some cyclical keto, sure, go for it if you want to try it. And that's one thing that at Spark Systems we can do. People come to us all the time and they're like, hey, I'd like to try paleo. I'd like to try keto. We can help anybody with that. We want to make sure that they're guided, that they're doing it properly. But
Sure.
I will say that going more of the metabolic efficiency route where we are having carbohydrate, but it's the right type of carbohydrate at the right time in the right periodization model. So we will all work off a periodization model, whether you're an athlete or not, you should be working off a periodization model. And that periodization model needs to be a combination of the proper nutrition as well, combined with the proper training intensities. And so we know, just like Taylor hit on, whenever we're going a little bit higher intensities, as we get closer to that pre-competition into competition phase, we will need some of the carbohydrate. We want to guide you in choosing the proper carbohydrate, the proper type at the proper time.
Okay, that's some clarity. So keto has a time, it's got a place, but if you're trying to be all keto by reading blogs and buying the products at the store that have the label on them, you're just pretending. All right, cool. So Taylor and Anna, another question for you from Jamie. And this, I think about my sister and mom and my uncle, for that matter, both have, take medication for Hashimoto's disease. Are there any recommendations for athletes? Maybe you're 50 plus and you're dealing with thyroid diseases. Is there any kind of tips or tricks with respect to that?
So we actually work with a lot of people that do suffer from Hashimoto's or other autoimmune diseases, and nutrition is the biggest thing that you can do in order to suppress, that and keep it where it's controlled. And for sure, getting carbohydrate out, and I'm not going to say, obviously if you're celiac, getting gluten out is a big deal. But you will find that whenever, gluten can be so modified, that it's really, and also think about it as it's all washed in chlorine. And so when you're taking in this gluten, you're also taking in a bit of that chlorine. So it's, like, I don't want to eat chlorine. And so always keeping that in mind, that reducing the amount of gluten and just seeing that how you feel. If you feel less bloated, with Sparks, we try to start with, trying to figure out what carbohydrates work for people and what carbohydrates may need to be eliminated altogether. And when you're dealing with someone with autoimmune, like really starting there and seeing what foods are working well and what foods are really like activating that response and creating that inflammation. It's our starting point. So we test and then we begin to figure out what foods are going to be beneficial for them and their gut health as well. And understanding too, that we have this gut-brain axis, so they'll know right away too, if their gut is that disrupted, then also their mental acuity is off, their sleep is off. Blood sugar usually is off. And so we work a ton with people that have autoimmune conditions and are very successful.
I'll give you an example. I'll touch base on when I was eating those baguettes. I was keeping that diet for, I would say, 4 or 5 years. And I was not in the best health at all. I was dipping down to close to 120 pounds, sometimes even less, with visits to the bathroom over 10 times a day. And this was consistent for years and years and years. And
that was your norm.
I thought that was my normal, right? I had lived with that for so long. And I thought that feeling that drained every day was normal until I made a switch in my diet to remove gluten, which for me worked, thankfully. And I would say within 2 to 3 weeks, I was finally able to actually hold some weight on. My energy levels would come back up. My depression was starting to get better, mental clarity, everything like that. So it's changes like that can really be life changing for the benefit. And it's, like I said, it's not just on the bike. It's off the bike too. And in your daily life, which is far more important than on the bike. I mean, we want to dial in the nutrition for training and racing, but if we can't get it figured out off the bike, that's a problem.
Yeah. Now, Taylor, legend has it that you once ate an entire loaf of bread at a bike race, and it did not end well. You crashed, you bonked, and you may have even fallen asleep at that race. Do you remember that? And can you kind of give us a quick story about that?
I've had too many. I can't tell you which one it is because I've had too many race ending bonks prior to diet changes and everything like that. I've learned the hard way more times than I can count. I'll tell you that.
Sure. And you know, getting back to your racing performance, I remember I was at the this was, I want to say it was a 2018 24 Hours in the El Pueblo. You were racing solo, and I was in there. I was doing some announcing in the exchange tent and helping out, doing some volunteering. And I was watching you on the standings board. You were not out of the gate the first guy out. You were sitting, you know, top 10. I remember Lance Armstrong was there, George Hincapie. There's, you know, it's El Pueblo. It's serious competition. But I just remember watching you as the hours went by. Your lap times never really changed. Everybody else's lap times started to dwindle back, and you were just this freight train, this diesel. You were like a freighter that you had left point A and you were on your way to point B, and your speed was never going to change throughout the night. And you ended up, I think you won that race by at least a lap or two. And you know how much, you know, the nutrition plays a huge part in that, doesn't it?
I mean, I like to call 24-hour racing, it is a bike race, but it's an eating contest as well. And not just trying to pile in as much food as you can, but being smart with what you're putting into your body to fuel that work. And if you really get that right, and there's so many other things that go into it, I would say the proper nutrition and the proper mindset are the two most crucial things in any competition that you're doing. If it's a 24-hour race, if it's your first hour-long bike ride, anything, it's nutrition and mindset 100%. And it's a work in progress the whole time.
Sure. And we've talked a lot about nutrition. We touched a little bit on heart rate and zones and tapping into these fuel tanks. Let's talk about mindset and confidence for these events. And how important is confidence and mindset for you, Taylor?
It's huge. And I will be the first one to admit I struggle a lot with confidence. And it used to be a lot worse, both on and off the bike. And I still have internal struggles with that. When I go to a start line, I shouldn't say I'm always, but I have these doubts, right? And I think it's one of those things that it doesn't get exactly.
Body change all over. Mm-hmm.
Yep. And it's one of these things that, in my opinion, doesn't get talked about enough. So people may feel that way in a start line, but they don't want to raise their hand and talk about it. And so, for example, going into Old Pueblo 2018, I knew we had a big goal there of breaking the course record in the solo category. And I knew that I had to, number one, get my nutrition dialed. And number two, to accomplish that goal was to have my mindset on track. And I knew that I could easily step on my own toes, right? I think we can all get in our own way more so than anybody else. And it was really just having these honest conversations with myself of, it's not a failure if you don't reach your goal because you're making yourself vulnerable. You're going out there to basically to try something that some people may not have the courage to do. So if you do come up short, that's okay, right? There's always lessons to be learned. I actually read a quote today when I got back from my ride that said, there's never failure, it's only lessons learned. And having that mindset going into that, I was fortunate enough to start working with a sports psychologist prior to that race. And it really just kind of opened up these doors of like, I was putting too much pressure on myself, and there's no need for that, right? Like, we're not curing cancer. We're just going out there to ride bikes and have fun. And the once I saw that, things became clear. And I think sports in general have a problem with people not being honest or not raising their hand to talk about these issues on and off the bike of confidence, of depression, of stuff like that. And I've struggled, like I said, I've struggled with this massively. And one way of getting through it myself is talking about it to others and saying, hey, if you experience it, I'm here to talk to you about it as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's in my career in racing, that's something I've struggled with too, and it can be an absolute game killer. You have a small crash in the middle of the race, your confidence is low going in. Your mind just switches off. Like, that's it, DNF, it's over. I wasted my time even coming here, and that mindset. You can sometimes put yourself pretty deep in a hole, but like you said, talking about it and getting into that good mindset and that help from balancing that nutrition out can really to help you are great coping mechanisms to get through that. And so, I definitely feel your struggle on that for sure. And it's something that I think, probably more racers than we know about that struggle with that.
Yeah, it makes me sad because it like you said, it is common. And I think if you can tackle your nutrition on and off the bike, and if you can at least acknowledge if you do have anxiety or struggles with the mental side of sport or anything in general, if you can at least acknowledge it, that's the first step, right? So yeah, you're controlling the controllables, and that's all you can do. There's no sense in worrying about what somebody else is going to do during an event or a ride. You can only control what's in front of you, what you put in your body to fuel that work. For example, in 2018, after the Old Pueblo race, when we had set that record, I was pretty crushed. I was smashed physically and mentally. It was a draining ride, and we were going to the True Grit 100 3 weeks after, and that race alone is super taxing. And I think I touched my bike maybe 3 times in 3 weeks before that 100-mile race because I needed the recovery, right? So I went into that. Basically, I mean, I didn't have much confidence because I hadn't touched my bike much, but I was like, you know what? I'm going to enjoy this ride from start to finish, regardless of how it goes. If I get dead last, I'm going to be super happy. I'm going to just go out there and have fun with my bike. And we ended up winning for I think it was the 4th year in a row at that time. And so it just goes to show, if you can get yourself in that mindset and worry about what's in front of you at that moment, good things will happen.
Yeah, let go and surrender to the experience of the moment.
For sure. And I don't have it all figured out. I'm still working on it. But like I said, it's always a work in progress.
Yeah. Well, Taylor, I really appreciate the insight on mindset. Anna, I wanted to catch you. I want to get one final question in. And is there anything that you guys do differently for older athletes, or is it just straight up like, we're going to test this person? Doesn't matter if they're 20, doesn't matter if they're 60. We'll see where they're at. We'll see where their bases are, and we go off of that. Or are there some things that you guys do differently for some of your older athletes?
It's not that we do anything like differently. The testing protocols, everything are, exactly the same. As long as we know what their goals are, then we know what protocol we're going to put in place with the testing. Now, the thing that would change would be our plan for that individual, moving forward. So understanding that, we need to make sure that we are staying on top of maintaining and developing lean muscle mass, for an older individual. And so we can do a lot of modifications with nutrition in order to make nutrition and strength and flexibility work to make sure that we're maintaining and building that lean muscle mass, because that's huge. We want to make sure too that we understand hormonal balance may be a little bit different. And so when someone comes in to work with us, we have a naturopath that we use for blood work So we get all of those biomarkers as well to make sure that before we provide them with a nutrition plan, that we're not working against something that they have going on hormonally. We want to make sure that we address that first. And so yes, it's not that the testing itself changes per se for an older individual, but it's our plan of attack and how we're going to move forward with them.
Cool. Well, there you go, guys. We are just about out of time. Anna, Taylor, thank you guys so much. You guys are offering up do I understand this correctly? A 10% discount for everyone who's attending for doing
For testing, any of our testing.
Thank
So
you.
if someone wants to come in, I got you, Josh. Don't worry about it. 10% off of any of the testing. So if someone wants to come in and do our standard metabolic efficiency testing package, 10% off of that. If they wanted to do just a VO2 max test, 10% off that, or just a resting metabolic test, we'll give them 10% off that as well.
Yeah, and speaking of the metabolic efficiency package, you guys are going to be raffling, or we're going to be raffling off one of those at our final Power Down event come August 1st. So those of you guys that are viewing at Facebook Live and here on Zoom, you're not going to want to miss that August 1st. You want to be there. Taylor, Anna, thank you guys so much for giving us some insight on how we can put the sparks in our performance by reaching out to you guys at Spark Systems to dial in and pinpoint our training. Guys, it is we're gonna have to wrap up, but we got some cool upcoming events coming your way, and of course, you guys can get your name into the raffles that are coming your way. Oh, and speaking of raffles, Janet, Dave, we got a name for our yurt giveaway at the Flagstaff Nordic Center. So let's see who is going home with a night at a yurt. Uh-oh.
You're frozen.
There we go.
Vince. Yeah. Vince. Vince.
Way to go, Vince. Congratulations.
Woo, Vince.
Hopefully he lives here.
Nice.
Thank you so much for having us, guys. We really appreciate it.
Guys, we enjoyed it.
We appreciate it. We hope you guys will join us for our upcoming events. I am talking, of course, about the big raffle and the Go to Distance celebration coming up at August 1st, 4 p.m. No registration required. Just shoot us an email at flag2gcride@gmail.com, and we'll get you in on that Zoom meeting. We're going to announce our raffle prize winners, including the Sparks Systems raffle. That's about a $400 value coming your way, as well as all of our other great raffles from our awesome sponsors like Pivot Cycles, Specialized, and among the many others. So, guys, we hope to see you guys August 1st. Anna and Taylor, thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you guys coming up in a week from today for our final event. Thanks for watching, everybody. I'm Josh Mall, the voice for the Flag of Grand Canyon, and we'll see you next week.